Hey everybody, welcome to Jeff Needs Sports. I'm Jeff, that's Walker, and we're here to talk about the Week 7 playoff rankings. Hey, what is up, everybody? I'm Jeff. This is Jeff Needs Sports, and this is the release of my Week 7 playoff rankings. I know I say it every week. I'm not trying to be condescending, but if you're new to the show, these are what I think the rankings will be like going into the playoffs, not who I think are the best 8 to 12 teams in America. I factor in schedules, I factor in voters, the voter agenda, all of these things. So when we talk about these teams, when we talk about everything, I'm basing it on of like we're up to what I think this is the 8th year now of the playoffs. What I think the voters will do, what I think the council will do, and all that. This is not a if we have a tournament tomorrow, who I think will win. So that's very important. So I want to get that out of the way. But and then I want to introduce Walker Bailey. Thanks for coming on, man. How are you doing this week?
I'm great. We're one day closer to Saturday, right? And that's always a good
This
thing.
Yeah, let's take 2 minutes and just acknowledge this is one of the greatest
Yeah.
Saturday schedules that we've had. This has been a good schedule for the whole season. I think we could probably do a half hour on how good the season schedule has been overall. This is a great Saturday coming up, and I know you and I both. I don't have a team playing this week, but you and I both are really excited for how good our teams are doing. Um, the opportunities ahead of us. It's nice in college football to have the clear path. Like we know we win, we're in, and that's a fun time to be. So as an Ole Miss fan, man, how's it going there?
It's going well. They've got Auburn coming to town this week, so we'll see. It's one that historically has given Ole Miss fits. They, quite frankly, never beat Auburn. Whether Auburn's bad, good, doesn't exist, whatever it is, Auburn always finds a way to get the best of Ole Miss. It's actually the only team other than Alabama in Lane Kiffin's tenure that he hasn't beaten
Oh
at
my
least once.
goodness.
So, and Auburn's not, and like Auburn and Alabama are in a little bit different places right now. So, um, it'll be interesting. Ole Miss should win. I think it's going to be a lot closer than people probably are going to be satisfied with. Like, I think they may have to sneak out with one just because that's how Ole Miss Auburn goes. But we'll see. I'll be in person, so I'll be there in person.
Nice.
So, I'll miss Penn State, Michigan, and Kansas OU and a couple of the other early games. But when you get an opportunity to go and watch your team in person, you got to do it.
Now at Ole Miss, when you guys are tailgating and you doing all the pregame stuff or postgame stuff, do you watch the other games? Like as far as like at Ohio State, it's just hundreds of campers. Everybody's got a TV. Everybody just kind of stops and like watches the games before they enter the stadium. Is it similar to that?
Yeah, so you've got the tent set up everywhere across the grove, across campus, and
Yeah,
like the
that's
way
that's nasty. That's
well,
so
and then
nasty.
the way it works is like a lot of people have power sources where they'll run their cables and then they'll
For
bring like
sure.
mounts and then they'll mount their TVs in the corner of the tent and run cable in there. So while you're
Okay.
sitting and eating and conversing, so you've got the TVs in the tent where if you just turn around and look, you can see whatever game is on. So if you go back to the Grove after Ole Miss Auburn, like Alabama Tennessee will be on the TV in your tent. So if you want to stay in tent
Oh,
game, you could sit there with your buds and watch Alabama Tennessee and stay in the Grove as opposed to having to book it home to try to catch games.
yep.
It's pretty cool.
It's the same way we do. You if it's an early game, you leave Ohio Stadium, you go to the tailgate, and then everybody sits around and watches whatever like the 3:30 game is or the night game is. Or if we're playing late, everybody gathers around and watches. But you have some really great conversations because everybody's there to watch college football, and you're like you can. It's amazing some of the really in depth, like smart conversations that you'll have. Because I say that a lot. I'm like I might meet 15 people smarter at a tailgate than anybody on ESPN, that day. So I get what you're coming from, man. That's awesome. So I won't get too distracted on that because we both love the mystique, the pageantry, everything about college
Everything.
football. Things are going great for our team. We had a great Saturday coming up. So what I've brought Walker on here for tonight is this a release of my Week 7 playoff rankings. About every 2 weeks I do these. Again, they're my playoff rankings, not who I think are the best teams in America. And then he's going to tell me what's right, what's wrong, what's indifferent, how crazy I am. So here we go. There they are. So here I'll go 8 through 1, and then I'll let Walker tear me apart. At 8, I got Tennessee. I'll give you the explanation why when we start talking about it. At 7, I still got Oklahoma State. Everybody that knows it's followed me all season. I'm stuck on Oklahoma State. We'll talk more about that. I've got Alabama at 6, and I know that's a shocker. Go ahead and send your tweets now. I've got every reason for it. 5, I've got Michigan. 4, I've got USC. I know we're going to talk about that, Walker. 3, I've got Clemson. 2, I've got Georgia. 1, I've got Ohio State. And I know I'm an Ohio State fan, but that is not why. I'm not the only person in the country that has Ohio State number 1 this week in any kind of ranking, but I do have them number 1 in my playoff rankings this week. So, Walker, I'll just let you go, man. You asked me the questions. I've got a list here of some sort of reasoning to try and get myself out of this. You let me know your thoughts.
Well, and I'll start. I totally agree that Ohio State deserves to be first in any ranking right now. They've handled business in a way that number one.
That's it. They've handled their business. But here, I just want to throw this out at you. I push back a little on Ohio State fans because everybody's like, they need to be number 1. They need to be number 1. I also say that a lot of if any of these probably top 5 teams had a Ohio State schedule, they would be undefeated. They would look pretty good. I think that, if Bryce Young was a quarterback at Ohio State, they would still look the same. Like, I don't think there's the void there between the next teams that everybody thinks, but I will admit Ohio State has done everything they needed to do, especially defensively.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. So I'll just we'll go with the obvious one here. Alabama at 6.
And I'll just tell you why, right?
Okay, yeah, just go for it. Take over. I just kind of want to hear.
No, I'll tell you why, and then I'll take your questions. Okay. Strictly because when I do my rankings, I pick the games, and that's what I try to separate myself is I go out on a limb and I pick the games. That's why I don't have we'll say Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, Ole Miss in the top 6 because it just can't end up that way. So I pick games, and I think that this week, I think Tennessee can pick Alabama off. That's my entire reasoning for that. Not that I think Alabama's a bad team. I just think this specific week, the Tennessee can pick them off.
I will say this, and I guess, everybody's assuming it, but Bryce Young is playing Saturday.
I've heard
he's going to play Saturday. So
yeah.
That's why
I'm less confident than I was, but I couldn't back down. You know what I mean? I got to stick with my pick.
My only thing with Alabama, Tennessee this weekend is I loved Tennessee last week, and then I started listening to, we get to Sunday after A&M almost beats Alabama in Tuscaloosa, and now all of a sudden everybody loves Tennessee, and right. I'm kind of in the place where I looked it up today because I was like, am I just hearing this on TV or is this a real thing? And I know we kind of complain about how gambling has affected sports, but 90% of public wagers are on Tennessee against Alabama right now. Oh, boy. Which kind of makes me feel like this is the spot where Alabama kind of rolls up in there and pipes them.
And I totally agree. I'm banking everything on. I hope I'm wrong, but even though Bryce Young's playing, something makes me nervous about his shoulder. And that is strictly, I'm banking everything on the fact that I don't think he's healthy, and I don't think Monroe could beat Tennessee, even though I think he could probably gut out most victories.
I do think that for Alabama, just while we're here, I think if they're going to win that game, I do think we may have more than a Bryce Young game. I think this may be a Will Anderson game, where he looks across from a right tackle or a left tackle and just says, you know what, I'm going to go and have 4 sacks or force 2 fumbles, and we're gonna get short fields, and we're gonna pull away and win this thing.
He was a monster last week for Texas A&M, an absolute monster.
And if he doesn't, though, Tennessee's got a real shot because if they can block up front, they're well coached in that offense. They're gonna get guys open, and Hendon Hooker's gonna throw guys open. That's where he's at confidence-wise right now. The ball he threw against LSU last week was absurd. The ball in between the safety and the corner where he hit the guy in stride and put it in the end zone. And then USC at 4. So I know you said you picked the games. So I'm guessing that means you think that they're going to Salt Lake City and winning this weekend. And
I do, and you don't. And there's 2 things that factor here. I'll be full disclosure. I've been on USC since day one, and I'm like, well, I don't like. I looked at the schedule day one. I saw the quality of teams. My rankings didn't come out till after week 2, so I had a time to see everybody play. And I said that USC was going to win this game, so I didn't want to change it now because like, they're not scoring as much as I thought. You brought up some great points, which we'll bring up here in a minute, and I'm like, well, no, because some of it. This is probably the one that is the most about integrity as far as like I'm just sticking to my guns. I picked USC. If I back down now, then what are my rankings really worth? I mean, I got to believe in what I said, 4 weeks ago, but I'm very shaky on it. But I do think if they get through Utah, I think they beat UCLA. They're going to beat Notre Dame. You get a ton of credit for beating Notre Dame, whoever you are, whether it's Ohio State, whether you're Cincinnati, whatever, at the end of the season. And then obviously I think they're going to go undefeated, which I know is ludicrous. It is ludicrous to think that USC is going to go undefeated. But when I go down through their schedule, I'm like, I think there's a chance, more than I think there's a chance that Michigan, Alabama, Oklahoma State, or Tennessee go undefeated. I think it's almost impossible for Tennessee to go undefeated,
and I can't
as good as they are.
And I can't really complain because like I think like 4 through 8 here are all likely to drop one at some point.
Yeah, but I want to hear your thoughts on USC Utah because what you text me made a lot of sense.
So I mean, my problem with USC as a team right now is they are improved defensively. So like I want to get that out there because I don't want it to sound like I'm just crapping on their defense and they're not good. But it's a defense that relies on forcing turnovers and relies on opponents making mistakes over the course of games. And we saw that in Corvallis. Like they needed God, I can't remember the kid's name, but the poor kid that played quarterback that night, Chance Nolan, I think, at Oregon State. He threw like 3 interceptions, 2 in plus territory, and USC got out of there with like a 3-point win. So it was one of those where I was like, Oregon State's good. They're not great. So when you go play these other teams, like a fifth-year quarterback at UCLA and DTR, or Cam played in a Rose Bowl last year, like I'm just hesitant to think that those guys are going to make those mistakes. And then I also worry about the run defense against those teams because USC gives up a lot of chunk plays on the ground. And like Utah is going to get in the power I and like run at you with Tavion Thomas, and even Rising is capable of making plays with his legs and like read option stuff. And then like DTR and Charbonnet are dynamic in a completely different style of rushing attack. So I just have those concerns with USC. And I know that I think they play at UCLA, which is a non-factor. But, I just think they're likely to drop one of them. I think they could drop both of them. I just think they're likely to drop one of them.
Yeah, me too. And this was a situation to where like, I try to project the conference champions, especially undefeated conference champions. And I think the best shot was USC or UCLA. And I literally was like, I got to pick between the two. This is where, I spent an exorbitant amount of time picking these games. Or picking these teams or / picking these games. It's between USC, UCLA. It's between TCU, Oklahoma State, between Ole Miss, Tennessee. I went round and round. I made charts. I look at stats. They're identical. Like these teams in these conferences, like stats are identical. You have to like watch. I don't get to watch them as much as I wish I could because East Coast, Ohio State, all the tape I watch and all these things. And I'm like, I literally was like, I'm either going to put UCLA at 4, I'm going to put USC at 4. And I'm like, week 2, I said USC. I'm going to stick to my guns because whatever Jeff, 4 weeks ago was thinking, I got to trust. And that's it. Everything you say, I think is correct. And if you tell me they're going to lose both those games, I'd be like, no, I believe it. But then I'm like, but if they, a lot of it's path because they're still just in a situation to where if they went out, they're in, just like UCLA or Utah's not in that situation. So,
well, and that's why they're not quite as high. They get the tough Pac-12 championship game in that hypothetical against Oregon too. More than I guess it would be Oregon. So they've got a couple tough ones left. I don't have any problem with Ole Miss not being.
Most of these teams have a really tough schedule left.
That's why I was about to go. I don't have that's why I don't have a problem with Ole Miss not being there because they're about to go. I mean, you get Auburn this week, which is really kind of like a game you should win. But after that, You go to LSU, which, I mean, I don't care how bad LSU is. That's a hard place to win. You follow that up, you turn around and then go to Kyle Field the next week, which is another really tough place to win.
Yeah.
And then you get the open date, and then you get Alabama, turn around, go to Fayetteville, come home and play Mississippi State. And that's just –
that is a gauntlet. And let me tell you, I'm glad you brought that up. We'll just, everybody can see this here. Well, I want to talk about Oklahoma State TCU for a minute, but before I get there, well, let's look at my next four. And I didn't rank these four. I just put them up there so I don't have a top 12. Ole Miss is in my next four, and everything you said when I was deciding between them and Tennessee, the edge that I gave Tennessee is that I think they get a worse Alabama team this week. Yeah. That's it. That's the difference in the team. I think that if they all play Saturday in some, I don't know, magical Xbox tournament, I think Ole Miss has, just as much a shot as Tennessee. I think Tennessee is getting a more vulnerable Alabama team than Ole Miss is going to see later in the season. This is all projection. I mean, obviously a sprained ankle here or there changes it, but it was paper thin. You see UCLA, I said the same thing about them. You see TCU, and then you see Penn State. The common theme here is these are all the teams that basically all these teams are in the same situation as the teams above them in their conference. It's just like, how's it going to go? Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan are all in the exact same boat. Like they all went out there they all play each other. It's all the same. Oklahoma State, TCU play each other this weekend. Ole Miss, Tennessee, essentially, they don't have the same schedule, but they got the same path to get there. And I gave Tennessee the edge just because I think that them getting Alabama this weekend is the only edge, because I do think Alabama's a really good team. I still think they're good. And I think if they get healthy late, then they're good. They might be really good. So, but if you can catch them now,
my hope is that Alabama, like if I'm being selfish, my hope is that Alabama wins like 48-0 and then goes on a roll here and just kind of lulls themselves back to sleep by week 9. That's what we're hoping.
Fair. There's nothing, that's a fair thing. No, this weekend I want Penn State to get the snot clobbered out of them. You know what I mean? Like I don't want them to come out of that healthy and energized. Like I want them to. I want to sit back and watch them have a tough game. That's the same thing. So I want to talk about Oklahoma State TCU real quick.
Let's do it.
I picked Oklahoma State earlier. Again, that's what gives them the edge. I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that I'm not personally tied to these teams. I had Oklahoma State last year, and honestly, I was an inch away from being right about Oklahoma State last season, in the conference championship game. So I stuck with Oklahoma State. They play TCU this weekend. TCU's favored. TCU just came off a great game. Both these teams, when you line them up, both have had not so great schedules. Nobody's had a great schedule right now. Let's be honest. And then their stats are the same defensively, offensively. They both have quarterbacks that make good decisions. They've been around a minute. They've got like you say, they've got that extra gene. They got that moxie or whatever. It is so hard to find a separation. I went with Oklahoma State because I went with them early, and I think Mike Riley, he's done a really good job for years, and he just like slips up in the one game, or again last year, like inches away in the championship game. How do you feel about Oklahoma State TCU?
So we weirdly don't give Oklahoma State the benefit of any doubt every year, despite the fact that they've won 18 of their last 20 football games, and that program's like run. Like, we don't give them the benefit of any doubt because they always lose at the most untimely time.
Yes.
Like, they just lose at the worst moments. Now, with all of that being said, I'm picking TCU. I think TCU is going to win. I think it's one of those where, like, the margins are razor thin. And I think a sellout crowd in Fort Worth, which is a sneaky hard place to play, ask Oklahoma. I think being in Fort Worth, kind of a midday kickoff, I think TCU's for real, and I think we've kind of undervalued them a little bit. Like, Sonny Dykes came in, lost his best offensive weapon to the portal to Ole Miss, and then turned around and turned an offense into a juggernaut. I like TCU Saturday almost strictly off of home field, and I think what we're trending towards in the Big 12 is we're going to get undefeated TCU against undefeated with Quinn Ewers, Texas.
Woo-hoo.
That's what I think. And I said undefeated with, so like they'd be like, and that's like the second to last week of the season. So they would be like, I guess like 8-2, 9-2, and TCU would be like 9-0, 10-0, something like that. And it's in Austin too. So
I agree. I mean, I've got a slightly bad taste in my mouth for TCU. We went down to Texas a few years ago to watch Ohio State versus TCU. Didn't come away with a great taste in my mouth for the TCU fans, but you know how it is. You can meet a group of fans and develop a negative connotation, but came away with the win. Neither here nor there.
They just battered us in the Peach Bowl, not back in the Hugh Freeze era. They just absolutely beat the piss out of us.
Yeah,
the year that they finished. I want to say they finished 12-1, won the Big 12 or something like that, and got left out of the playoffs.
Believe me, we heard all about it. I know.
Well, they came to Atlanta. They came to Atlanta all pissed off and
with an agenda.
Ole Miss came into that game, and the players would tell you they came into the game a little bit hungover, just had a good time, and TCU came in looking for blood, and it was just
they were on two different wavelengths.
Yep, nope. They got. I turned it off by the end of the second possession of the second quarter because it was 28-0. Yeah, it was bad.
So I'll ask you this question: if I would have put, let's say now, looking at this the way I've got it now, we'll say if I switched out USC for Pac-12, and I switched out Oklahoma State for Big 12, which one of those do you think has a better shot at the playoffs? Whoever you think is going to win those conferences.
Oh, I think Gundy wins the Pac-12 relatively easily. I think USC has a really hard time in the Big 12. I think USC's line play and the fact that if they were in the Big 12, they would rely on creating turnovers because we just, like you just said it, so many quarterbacks that make good decisions and play high quality football. Like, I mean, in the Big 12, and I know he just got hurt, but you got Jalon Daniels, Max Duggan, Quinn Ewers, Dylan Gabriel. I mean, that's just off the top of my head. Adrian Martinez this year, who hasn't thrown an interception. Ooh. I mean, that's half the conference. That's half a schedule. And so I think
has that been the most surprise? What's been the most surprising conference, Pac-12 or Big 12?
I think it's
the Pac-12 for me.
See, I think for me, it's the Big 12 quality from top to bottom in the sense that there's not a single team that's not good.
Especially when Oklahoma is not a good team in it, and they're a good team.
They are potentially the second worst team in that conference. I think them and West Virginia.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, Oklahoma could still knock somebody off. Like if Oklahoma plays Oklahoma would probably win the Big Ten West.
Oh, I mean, if I told you that Oklahoma beat Kansas on Saturday 35-10, are you going to immediately call me a liar? Like, are you just like,
no. I think this has been. We won't go too far down the rabbit hole now. Maybe we'll do. I know you guys do a college football show, and you'll talk about it. But I think it's been a better season than we've realized, and I think it's about to get really good. I think we're about to have a really good. I think what we got left now, 6 weeks of the season.
I think 6.5 weeks.
I think the Big 12 has been the biggest difference. I think the way Texas played, Saturday was awesome. Obviously Kansas has been awesome. I think that's been a big difference. I think the Pac-12 we thought Washington was for real, but I couldn't have been more wrong about a team. I had Washington number 8 2 weeks ago, and they got blasted 2 weeks in a row. To be fair, the AP had Michigan State at 11 about 4 weeks ago.
And they're pretty horrible.
They are a dumpster fire. So, for sure. So the only okay, let's do this real quick. We got a little extra time. It feels like you're close on my rankings. You don't think I'm an idiot. It feels like USC is the one. But if I put who would you put it for?
I would have. So I probably would have done it right now. I probably would have gone Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, Michigan, USC.
So you still think that Alabama and Georgia are both getting in the playoffs?
I do. Because right now, because look at the schedule.
And remember, I'm basing mine on I think Tennessee beats them this weekend. I just want everybody to be clear.
That's why for me, and the mind I'm in. I think Alabama pops them this weekend.
Okay.
And if we go down that road, I think also one of the underrated storylines we're not talking about this year is that the SEC West is actually not that good. And so I don't think that they're losing to Mississippi State the following week, even though State's good. Like, they're a good football team.
Yeah, no, State's having a good season, by the way. That Rogers is putting up stupid numbers, by the way.
And so I don't think they're losing there. They already took care of their road trip to Arkansas. I mean, they're probably not losing to Auburn, who's got a lame duck head coach, and that game's in Tuscaloosa this year. So the weird ones happen at Jordan-Hare. When they go to Tuscaloosa, Alabama just beats the brakes off of them. So then that kind of leaves you. You're like, all right, well, then and LSU's not going to get them. That game's in Tuscaloosa too, I'm pretty sure. And so then you're like, all right, well, is Lane going to beat them in Oxford? And for me right now, I don't think they're there.
So when I originally did my rankings, I said either Tennessee. This was originally. I know it sounds crazy now. Well, I wasn't actually. It doesn't sound crazy because Texas A&M were one terrible play call away from winning that game. But I said that either Texas A&M, Ole Miss, or Tennessee would beat them before. And then I'm hinging a lot on, if somebody can jump them and keep Alabama out of that conference championship game, that's how they stay out of the playoffs. This is not an anti-Alabama podcast. They get a lot of things.
It has to be Ole Miss, and that's the only way they're not getting in is if Ole Miss somehow magically runs the table. And I just read.
I don't think it would do magically though. I mean, I know it would be like every game, like it would take a great effort, but I don't think it would be magical. I think that everything could fall in place and that it could wind up that way. And that's kind of what I'm banking on. Again, I'll know a lot more after this weekend. If Alabama wins this weekend, then it's crazy.
You mentioned the play call and at the end of Alabama. Did you watch the Saban thing where he did the thing at the TV and was walking you through the defensive?
No, I missed it. I heard it was good.
Yeah. So it was an incredible watch because Saban apparently, when he was talking about it, he went into the huddle. And you know how college football works. That was not a play that they called on Saturday night on the 2. They because you're basically running a 2-point play there, and it's they called that on Wednesday. They ran whatever they're
right,
and they had run that exact play earlier in the game against Alabama's goal line defense or whatever, and scored a touchdown. And so they were like, all right, well, we know that's going to work, and we're going to go back to it. And Saban predicted on the sideline in the timeout that that's what they were going to do, and took all of his defensive backs and switched the leverage. So now instead of inside or outside leverage, they're all giving inside leverage. And so A&M lined up without a timeout and had no idea what to do. And they just had to try to figure something out. Yeah. And so
when Saban didn't do that was versus Clemson and Deshaun Watson in that national championship game. He did the opposite and stuck with his defense. He stuck with the inside and he gave that sprint open. So that's the thing. It's not negative, but that's called coaching. That's where coaching steps in. Saban's one of the greatest defensive.
Well, and then they tried to, on that other side, they tried to run that pylon route that a lot of teams run, where you try to push the DB and then you come back to the pylon and you
come back to the pylon.
But the problem with that is, for that to work, the DB has to bite, and when you're on the 2, you're not going to be able to sell him that
there's no space. I'm always a fan of getting a quarterback moving in that situation, just because it gives you the freak chance of he sees a gap, he can dive in or something, or a guy comes across, and you're never going to get the penalty there either. I don't care what happens there. Alabama's guy could have picked him up and threw him into the sidelines. You're not going to get a penalty there.
Well, I never hate that. A lot of people, we saw the trend 5 years ago, where a lot of people would run the play action and then run the leak route to the other side of the end zone, and that it worked 80% of the time, and then people just stopped doing it. They were just nah, we're done. Because I remember Dan Mullen at Florida with every quarterback he had there, they'd run it all the time, and the kid would just be standing there wide open. And it happened a few times Saturday where I was I think Kansas ran it multiple times. They ran their leak concepts or whatever, and I was just yeah, I mean, it still works. They should do people should try that more.
Well, if you watch a Kansas City Chiefs Monday night, on the, when they get in the red zone, they do so many things, and guys are catching wide open balls. Like, I'm always a fan of, like, especially when it's desperation, like when that you got one throw. I don't like throwing towards the sidelines because a bad throw can just end your game, as to where, like, I'll take my chances on a tipped interception, but it could also be a tip touchdown. Like, it gives me, even if it's 1% more chance, you know what I mean, of a tip ball. And
I'm a firm believer in get your best player the ball, and like Six should have touched the ball there. A-Chain probably should have touched the ball one way or another. And the problem with Haynes King playing quarterback for them is he goes through that super long, elongated motion where he like stops at the top of the, so like it just gives everybody so much time to react. It was just a bad spot for A&M, and it's not a spot where you really trust Haynes. And it was the last play of the game regardless. Like, you were going to have zeros on the clock regardless. And that's why I'm kind of like, if you had just handed the ball off up the middle there, like, I think you probably just walk in. Like,
I know, and I know it's tough.
Hindsight's 2020. That's why I'm all in on Kansas's head coach, because he's so good at all that stuff.
Yeah,
like,
I hope
there was stuff he was doing Saturday where he had TCU defenders running into each other on Saturday, and like those were guys fascinating. Those were guys that had been all conference DBs. Like, they were just running into each other. I said this on Field Stormers last week, because we were talking about Paul Chryst getting fired. For me, and this is not what Wisconsin's going to end up doing, I don't think. For me, that's the most obvious head coaching hire in the world, because
for everybody.
Well, but even for him, like, he coached at Wisconsin Whitewater for all those years. He's super familiar with the ground. His family loved it there. Like, that's somewhere that's comfortable for him. And then you also include the fact that they just have like the resources, and they're a competitive program that has like expectations of winning. So, and they're going to hire Jim Leonard, I think, which to me is just like, you got really pissed off at Paul Chryst for the lack of organization and like everything that was going on within the program. And then you're going to hire from within that program.
You know what? I say that a lot. I shouldn't complain, because we've got lucky so far and kept, I said the same thing about Ryan Day. I'm like, oh, great. That's what we need to do, is keep the guy from the,
and then look at it, think about it this way. Well, and then think about it this way. Look at how Barry Alvarez did it. He was very strategic about how he wanted to do it, because he knows exactly who he wants to hire. He wants to hire Jim Leonard. So he fired Paul Chryst the week before Northwestern with a thought in mind. I'm going to give him the easiest. I am going to give him the easiest win possible and the best chance to make a statement and build momentum, so that when I go at the end of the year and hire this guy, the fans are behind it, because they're going to remember, hey, this guy came in and won 3 straight. He saw, oh man, we've got Northwestern and Michigan State back to back, with Michigan State coming to Madison. Fire him now. Don't wait, because Paul will win those games too. Like, Paul will also win those games.
100%.
So we need to get him out now and let Leonard build the momentum from winning those games, which tells me that they want to hire Leonard.
100%.
And so to me, that's what's going to happen. And Leipold's 58. We talked about this on Field Stormers. Like, if he's going to jump, the time is now. And the worst thing that could have happened for him is that Matt Rule got fired, because Matt Rule at Nebraska makes all the sense in the world.
That's one more job. Yeah. But the thing is also, though, that's what I mean. Like, it's like that. You're like, but the thing is too, you take just the football coach out of it. You got to look at the money wise and be like, I want to take whatever it is right now, my buyout. Look at you, like Jimbo's still at like 90 million or whatever. Like, if you're him, you take whatever like cash grab you can get. In 2 years from now, you can take your dream job, and you can take the Charlie Weiss route and get paid by like 3 different teams for the next 10 years. That would be the way to go. All right, man. Hey, thanks a lot for doing this. Again, everybody go check out Field Stormers with Walker and Mo. Every now and then I get to jump in. Even more great college football talk. They'll get a lot deeper into the schedules. They'll get a lot deeper into, the who's who and the movings and all that. Walker's way more tapped into it than I am. Unfortunately, attending the games and trying to trying to do all this, I don't get to watch as much college football as I like to until the latter weeks. So that's why I have experts like him come on and, go check that out. And of course, check me out, Jeff Needs Sports, anywhere you get your podcast. Walker, thanks a lot for being on, man. This was a blast. And thanks for not dragging me over the coals too bad.
No problem.
All right. Maybe next time we talk, those Rebels are up there. I'm really hoping for it.
If we can get USC beat on Saturday, then we'll have a shot.
Oh, absolutely. All right, everybody. I'm Jeff from Jeff Needs Sports. That's Walker, and we are out. Thanks.